All right, folks, welcome back to the latest edition of the Build It podcast. Joining me as ever is John Hall. Hello, John.
Hey, buddy.
Joining us even from sunny northern Illinois is our friend and colleague Bruce Bode. Bode or Bodie?
Bodie.
Bodie, there we go, sweet. And now, courtesy of ChatGPT, Bruce Bode is an experienced soccer player, referee, and event producer with over 30 years of experience. He has also appeared in a Hollywood film, a Weather Channel documentary, and performed on the Second City ETC stage. Bruce is a co-founder of the Illinois Referee Alliance, an organization dedicated to supporting and training referees even in Illinois. In this podcast, we will be exploring Bruce's extensive background as a referee, including his experience as a referee assigner, referee, regional referee assessor, and instructor, and referee liaison, yada, yada, yada. We will also discuss why the Referee Alliance was needed. Additionally, and this is the point here, we will dive into Bruce's role as the executive director with the United States Adult Soccer Association and the work he is doing to support adult soccer players across the country.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you? Nick, you did some deep dive in there, buddy. Not many people will talk off a couple of those things. Ooh, man.
Honestly, you were a hard man to get anything on. There's only like 2 photos of you, and like one of them was from this soccer foundation thing. That whole Hollywood Weather Channel thing might be bullshit for all I know, but it's now going out there these days.
Yeah, it's actually not. It's actually true, but not many people have come across that.
No, I will keep looking. And apparently I'm also going to ask you about coconuts at some point, but yeah, we will get to that, I'm sure.
My favorite topics. One of my favorite topics.
So, as all that preamble suggested, Bruce is a man of a certain vintage who has a lot of experience both on the refereeing side, on the admin side. He is now very important in the world of US adult soccer, despite appearances to the contrary. He also kindly graced us with his attendance at the Midwest Premier League AGM the other week, and it was a pleasure to meet you there, Bruce. I know you've been to a couple of DeKalb games. Thank you for your patronage there.
Nick, he only came to the free one.
Joel, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. From small acorns, we grow this, But to have someone attending executive board meetings in DeKalb uniform, that's something, right? I guess, first order of business, without betraying any confidences whatsoever, unless you really want to, Bruce, how was the US Soccer AGM?
That was my first Federation AGM. First experience there. I mean, I've been to the USASA one, but not to the Federation. And I'll have to say, honestly, it was a really good experience. I met a lot of people. Looking specifically at the U.S. soccer side, I can't deny it was impressive. They do a really good job. Their staff does a really good job, and it was a well-run event, smooth. I know my reporting to me has indicated that's not always been the case in the past, but it was good. And from my standpoint, in terms of USASA, because all of our members, almost all of our members, are also U.S. soccer members, the state associations in particular I'm thinking of, they were all there, and so it gave me an opportunity to meet them in person. I mean, I've only been on the job 2 weeks, so it was, timing-wise, it was perfect for me. I was able to put names with faces for the people that I've talked to already, and then also just meet a lot of other people that I haven't met yet, and I think give them an opportunity to see me in person and kind of see what I'm about, and likewise, I was able to do the same for them. So it was a really good experience for me. I think the event went well, learned a great deal both about our organization and about U.S. soccer. So I don't have any good gossipy tidbits, but it was fun.
I know you do. You're just not drunk enough.
Yeah, my question was, any hot topics that were discussed, even if no resolutions? Was there any topics or any bullet points that you thought, well, that's something we probably need to get figured out sooner than later, even if there isn't an answer yet?
Yeah, on the U.S. soccer side, I mean, one issue which was up for a vote, a bylaw change. There was a ton of bylaw changes. Most of them, I think, pretty well thought out and addressed. But the ones that kind of affected the adults were one, whether or not to pay the president of U.S. Soccer, and that's been an issue I know that's kind of been bouncing around out there for a while, but it was up for a vote. It needed 2/3 to pass as a bylaw change. And there was a little bit of discussion on the floor even before the vote as to the merits of paying the president. It didn't pass. I believe it was a little over 50% in support. So it's still, vote-wise, it's still had a ways to go. There was a couple other things that affected us directly. One was we had a proposal out there to reduce the total membership numbers needed in order to be a national association or have a national council. And currently it's 200,000 members. So USASA on the adult side, we're the only member of the adult council. And we proposed reducing that to 150. That one didn't pass. It doesn't really have an impact on us directly one way or the other. But the thinking behind it was to enable some other organizations to become part of the adult council. I think that needs probably some more work before we get that passed or adjust the number or whatever. So those were kind of the two big ones that I think were up there. Certainly that affected the adult side. I'm trying to remember if there was anything else that was anything in the ether or talked about in terms of going forward, and nothing right now comes to mind, John, to tell you the truth.
So in your and you and I have talked a little bit the last month or so about this, but what led you to want to jump into this role as executive director with USASA?
It wasn't anything I was really looking for, to tell you the truth. I mean, I had a pretty good life at the moment. But when it was brought up to me, when the executive director, when Duncan was leaving, and I looked at him like, okay, let's see, I'm interested. It's a job in soccer, which, as I said before we started here a little bit, I mean, certainly I always thought, hey, if I could get a paying job in soccer, that'd be great, because all my work in soccer so far was kind of volunteer and maybe cover an expense here or two or tank of gas. But so I was like, all right, let's see what's involved, see what the organization, I knew about the organization, but see what's involved in terms of the job and who you're interacting with, what you're doing. Because I'd looked at my skill sets, I think, going back, I've been on some nonprofit boards. I've been involved in the soccer area. I've got some educational training which applies. I think I'm pretty good with groups and managing groups and teams. So I thought, okay, I think I've got a skill set that would help here. Some fresh eyes, maybe move the organization forward a little bit. And as I interviewed, spend more time talking to people, dug into it more, like, yeah, this is pretty exciting. The organization is at a point in time, I think, that there's some real opportunities going forward. And to be a part of that and help drive that going forward, that's a pretty exciting chance. I'm like, all right, let's see what they think of me. And they apparently thought enough to hire me, and here we are.
So it's been exactly 3 weeks, I believe, since you took your new role, and I guess give me a summary. What's the first 3 weeks been like? Any big surprises thus far that you weren't expecting?
It's been a whirlwind. It's been, as I've said to people that I've talked about it, it's not so much the amount of work that has been kind of crammed in this first 3 weeks, and it's been a lot. It's more having to do kind of with the timelines, because we're here in March, we're in early spring, and we've got Amateur Cup and the National Cups are already underway in terms of planning and progressing forward with registration and setting up games and scheduling and things like that. So that's already underway. Soccer Fest, which is kind of our big, less formal, more recreational, fun event in July, that's already well underway in terms of the planning and registering teams. Then we've got an AGM in 6 months, as well. So planning on that, which we have to have budgeting for 24 done, ready at that meeting, actually a month before that meeting. So it's certainly been a lot of stuff all at once, while I'm still trying to kind of find out who the players are, who everybody is, learning that. And one of the big challenges in front of us is figuring out exactly why we are, I think, is probably the way I describe it, is the why. What are we doing and why are we doing it? And right now we're missing a well-defined vision of what that is, I think. And as a consequence, what are the priorities? Like, what did I, in the interview process, we talked a lot about what the objectives are, the goals for this role and the organization, and how those, how we'll be able to achieve them. And that's, a big part of what I got to do, but I've got to get a lot of questions answered before we can kind of put that together. And we started on that in San Diego. The board and I met for a planning session, one of the first nights we were there. So there's just a lot happening all at once. I think now we got through the AGM a little bit, it's settled down a little bit, but this week I already talked to our staff members. We're, got to look at the AGM planning, got to look at budgeting already for 24 starting this week. And so there's just a lot. I mean, some people say, it's like drinking through a fire hose, trying to take a sip from a fire hose, and that's apt. It's also kind of the way I've looked at it is like the treadmill's on full speed, and it's like, here, and drop you on top of it. Try to get caught up and then figure out where you're going. Surprises? I can't say there's been any really big surprises. I came in knowing the organization a bit, so I'd like to say I came in with my eyes wide open and knew what I was getting into. I think the first 3 weeks now have shown that my eyes may have been wide open, but the glasses were a little foggy or maybe a little dark in some places, and so I'm see things differently than when I was on the outside. But no real big surprises, to be honest with you. Which has been good.
So it's interesting. You already went into kind of the biggest challenge, and it's funny because I think I might have even mentioned this to you previously, but I think that is one of the defining things in any organization, right? Is why and what is our mission statement and what problem are we actually trying to solve here? Otherwise, you kind of lose direction and go in 1,000 different ways, chasing headlines, chasing money, chasing whatever. You kind of you get lost in the chaos of the day to day sometimes. I think that's interesting. And I was just rereading the mission statement on USASA's website, which is bullet points, and it's there's a lot to it, but it's not defined because there's so many things there. They mention a lot of things, and it's I think kind of get rooting around to the basis of what that is in one sentence, I think is a good step. And it's funny you brought that challenge up because that was my next question. In your first few months, first year, whatever, is there any big or small thing that you'd like to kind of put your stamp on and get either fixed, changed, modified, clarified, or do you not know what that is yet?
In broad strokes, yes. I mean, we kind of laid out, I think, kind of a framework maybe is probably a little too generous, but in broad strokes, we kind of looked at 5 areas that we're going to drill down on and kind of get a better handle on what does that actually mean. But in looking at those, and I'll come back to all 5 of them in a second, but the one that kind of jumps out to me as being maybe more important than the others in terms of how it affects things is would come under the category, I think, of the broad category of saying we just need more data. And by that, I mean, we need to know more about who we are as an organization. So who are our members? And in detail, who are our members? Like, geographically, where are they? Demographically, where are they? What, ages and where are they playing, and things like that. I mean, just all those demographic areas to have a sense of who we are in terms of our player membership, and also in our state association membership, have a better understanding. I think, we all kind of know, what the state association, what they do, but it varies from region to region. I mean, the issues that are big out, and you know this, John, through the work that you're doing, the issues that are big and important to the group that's in New England are completely different than what you have in Southern California or the Southwest. So neither one by itself defines who we are, but together they give us an indication like, oh, we've really got a broad cross-section of people in the soccer community and the people involved in the soccer community. And when we were going coast to coast, that really widens us out. I mean, if you looked at one particular area or region, you could come up with one answer. It's like, oh yeah, we're this, and these are the priorities, and this is what's important, and this is where the culture comes from. And you could do that in probably, I mean, we've got 4 regions, but I would say, in big scopes, is probably like 3.5 parts of the country that kind of have similarities, unique to the others. So I think having that data and how we get it and what we get is important, because it flows into the other like 4 areas that we had talked about. So who we are in detail, like who are we? That will give us a better idea of why are we and what we need to do. So, you've heard growth is talked about all the time. We need to grow. Well, that means something different to everybody that says it pretty much. But in order to grow, whether it's revenue, whether it's membership, whether it's leagues, what that means and how we do that depends on what we know about our organization. If we're trying to grow a league in the Southwest, we need to know about the Southwest and what their needs and wants are and desires are. If we're trying to grow a league in Florida, South Florida, that's a completely different situation. And, part of the job is to find the overlap, of course, but it's also going to be, we need to know about those areas. And without the information, we're just guessing. And I like guessing about things and speculating, but when we're making decisions, we need to have the best information we can going forward. And I'm big on having that data. That's a big part of how I make decisions and look at solutions. So, whether it's growth and revenue, whether it's member services, I mean, how do we know what we provide? Member services is another area that we talked about. How do we know what to provide if we don't know who our members are? And to know that better is like, okay, this is what's of value to them. This isn't of value to them. This is what their concerns are. These are their challenges. Some states have paid staff. Other states, it's all volunteer. To have a handle on that is really important for us to make smart decisions going forward with the limited resources. I mean, everybody's got limited resources in one way or another, but with our limited resources, we've got to make smart decisions, and we can't afford to just hit and miss. And our membership isn't going to let us do that either right now.
So yeah, it's funny you brought up the regions, and I obviously dealing with the regional premier leagues and 7 different opinions, and or at least a handful of different opinions of 7. The differences are evident, and the cool thing is nobody's wrong. Everybody's right for what they're doing in their area, and that's been one of the rewarding things of spending the time on those calls with that group of people is they're doing things differently that I never would have thought of, or maybe in the Midwest it just doesn't work because of climate or whatever. But you're able to kind of put all the differences out in front of everybody, and then kind of pick and choose what works for you and what you think might be better, and that's been a big help. I'm curious. I know it's probably well beyond your role, but I've always wondered where the 4 regions, like this is a big freaking country. 4 regions seems like we could have 16 regions, to be honest, or sub-regions, and really get hyper intense on those challenges and the sort of the way it is in each of those areas, because even our region here in the Midwest is I think 13 states, and there's a lot of difference between Ohio and the Dakotas and Minnesota, and the way that adult amateur soccer works is it's just kind of hard to bring it all under one umbrella. But I mean, is there any? I don't even know how you do that. It's a bylaw thing and it's a structure thing. I know, but like, does that make some sense to really pare it down a little bit?
It's interesting. I mean, the regional structure. So, yeah, I mean, as our organization is structured, it has 4 regions in it. Basically West, Midwest, South, Southeast, and the Northeast. And I don't know. I don't feel strongly one way or the other about it right now myself. There were some people that have raised the issue about the utility of our regions right now. And I think that's probably a discussion which is going to happen at some point in the future. And I don't know. I mean, like you say, if you look at it more functionally, I guess, for lack of a better description, or culturally, maybe you could certainly have more than 4, because as you say, just looking at the Midwest, Minnesota to Southern Ohio, there's a big difference in just lots of different things. And you look at Region 3, you go from Texas to the Carolinas, there's big differences there too. So I don't know. I don't really know. As an organization, I just don't have enough information to say, is that a structure what does that structure add? I guess my question is always, what does it add? What's the value there? Just like us generally as an organization, what's the value? Where are we giving more value to our membership? So my question there is, what's the value? What's the add? I'm sure I think there is one. I could probably, we could sit here and probably come up with some. We could probably come up with some reasons that it doesn't work necessarily. But for me, it's certainly, at this point, I don't think it's a priority in the next, year, 2 years, at least, to address. I don't think it's.
I think it goes back to your point, Bruce. Sorry to interrupt you. It's all data, right? I mean, in your geographic, up in the Northwest, from Montana through the Dakotas, you could have a big region because there isn't a population, but I think you may just be able to use the data, like you said, to kind of at least consider those kinds of things. Like, maybe it does make more sense to have, I think, like, I always think, like, from our standpoint as an amateur club trying to run as efficiently and effectively as we can, it may never happen that we can afford to travel and play in our entire region. I mean, it's just, you draw a circle around beautiful DeKalb, Illinois, the center of the soccer universe, and that's as big as the region should be. 4 or 6 hours from there, and like these, you could have these pods of this area where you could actually play a season in your entire region. I think would be kind of neat, but I don't think it's not saving anything. I thought it was an interesting point to bring up with you, that it's a big damn country for 4 regions, and I just think it's interesting. So
in many ways, it's a big damn country, and that's a real challenge. And in most ways, it's unique to us as a country. I mean, there's not another soccer country that comes close to us in geographical size. So I think in some ways we got to find our own model.
Right. So what? One kind of last point about USASA. I know you're 3 weeks in. I don't want to grill you too much. And I'm a little foggy on all the way the state associations all work, and some do more than others, and some maybe don't even exist really, other than a website maybe. How important is it, and how do you at least try to get all the state associations to a common minimum standard of operations, where there's your subgroup, right, of your region is their state associations. How do you get them all functioning properly? Is that part of your job? Is that part of USASA's job? Or is that just, it is what it is and we support, but we can't put a ton of effort into it? And how does that all work?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's, excuse me, it's certainly one that is, I think, part of those areas that that we're kind of identifying, whether it's member services, so like what do we provide, and certainly it also comes into membership growth in terms of players. They have to function, because if you look at it, I mean, if you look at how we work as a business, more or less, we've got USASA, as kind of a parent organization, if you will, as a governing body here. And our state associations are kind of exclusive territory. They've got exclusive territories to represent us. So in order for us as an overall organization to grow, those representatives have to be effective, efficient, because they're kind of the direct conduit to the players in most cases. I mean, we have our national, our regional leagues, but the bulk of it comes through the state associations. So it is important, I believe it's important for us as a national organization to be able to provide them tools that they need and help them, whether it be training, whether it be tools, whether it be, examples of best practices, so that they don't, so that they can be effective at doing their job. And as you said, some are, in some cases non-existent or practically non-existent in terms of the activity they have in their area. Others are more effective, but some have paid staff, some don't. Some are joint with the youth association, so the adults are kind of an add-on, because we're far outnumbered by the youth side. And we have to, it's not, I'm not an us and them guy. It's not about, the they, or the, we did this and they did that, or I'm not about that. We've got to find a way to work together. And everybody that I've talked to has been, I think has been very clear, at least to me, it's been very clear in hearing what they have to say. Everyone articulates it a different way, but that the end goal, the light, the target, whatever, how you want to put it, is everybody's idea of that is pretty common. That end goal is kind of across the board. They're looking to make their organization better. They'd like USASA to be better, more effective, bigger, stronger, have more of an influence. All of those things are kind of across the board. But as you just said before, everybody's coming from their own experience, their own world, and they're doing what is right for them in their world. As you say, you both can't be right. No, actually, all 54 can be right, because for their experience, for their world, what they're doing is right. As a national organization, we have to find a way to kind of blend that into a more common understanding and process. And so in some cases, I think it is a matter of working with the state associations to make them more effective, efficient, so that they've got ideas. I don't expect, an organization with 3 effective volunteers to be able to handle coming up with the new ideas, getting them all implemented, handling the requirements that we have in terms of getting us information, material, registrations. It's just not practical. And if we as a national organization can give them some tools and say, hey, this may work for you to plug in to make part of your job easier, whether it's registrations or holding events, or maybe we can partner with you or find another partner for you to work on those things. I think that is our role. I think it's a really important role. And because if they're not effective, we're not effective. So the idea of like, well, it's not up to us. I'm personally, I don't buy that. It is up to us. It's always up to us to take the first step.
And it's interesting. I think, I don't know, I nerd out on some of this stuff because it's all still new to me. I've only kind of been in this adult admin stuff for 5 years, 6 years, and it still trying to figure out how to improve it. And again, goes back to why, like, what are we actually trying to improve? Are we trying to just get more state registered players? Is that ultimately what we're doing? Because that defines how we grow, or how we grow the game and how we measure, because it's a data point that we can pull year on year and say we grew by 12%, and it's all about player passes, or I mean, I I'm glad you have a full-time role now, so you can think about all these things, because there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming to even think of all the questions I want to ask you, to be honest. So I can't believe you actually have to try to solve some of these problems. So,
but what you said there, it's so true, John, to jump in for a second. I mean, in many ways, our biggest data point is just player registrations. And so, of course, it gathers all the attention. And it's like, well, growing means we have to have a bigger number there year to year. Well, it is important, and it's important to us for a lot of reasons, but it shouldn't be the only data point, and it shouldn't be the only thing we look at, because that doesn't tell the whole story, so, there's other things out there, I think, that tell the story of who we are. We just need to get better information to know what the details of that story are. And, I look at you and DeKalb and you in the Midwest Premier League, when you look at the numbers, you've grown a great deal. And you guys have worked really hard at kind of fashioning what your idea of growth looks like and how that fits. So that tells a story. That tells a story in the Midwest as to how you, as the Midwest Premier League, look at that. And as I've heard you say before, as you mentioned here, for DeKalb, you've got a story for DeKalb. You're in the DeKalb area. You've got a community club that is really tied to that community, and the success of that, probably, does it depend on you going to St. Louis to play teams? Probably not, right? But there's a role in that works. But as you say, I mean, maybe the success, in some places is what you say, that 2 hour, that 3 hour, maybe it's a 6 hour circle from you. For other places, the success, what they look at in terms of growth and their story is like, no, I want to be region wide, or I want to be national, have those opportunities. It's different. And we've got to get information that tells you that.
No, it's all overwhelming, because there are so many different ways, and people think about it. And truthfully, somebody that's loaded and wants to run a club like us could just pay for it and do whatever he wants. And it's not it's a completely different set of constraints of what success is and what challenges are. And I think that's where, as a nation, we're still figuring out how do we build from the bottom and find a place for all these different clubs to operate within their means, and hopefully not have to disappear because there wasn't the platform for them. And I could nerd out on that for a while. So talk about refereeing, Bruce. That's a hot topic with everybody. Nick, are you still with us?
I'm still with us. Bruce, before you do, I just want to have my 2 pence on the federation thing. The association, not federation. Is it possible that the USASA, SASA could put itself in a position where it actually dictates what growth is? When you've got these contrasting and conflicting voices of, it should be butts on seats, it should be players registered, it should be youth pipeline, it should be this, that, the other, various parts. Great, crack on, but we're in charge, and we've now decided that it is, the youth pipeline for one other thing, and all people need to be focusing on that for the next X number of years, and that's the leadership. I'm not saying it should be youth talent at all. I'm just saying, is there a possibility that people are looking for leadership, and the leadership is looking for a uniform voice, and the two dogs sit next to each other?
Yeah, I think, Nick, I think to a certain extent, what you are going to see from USASA is these are going to be our priorities for the next year, 3 years. This is how we look at it, at some point, I think 5 years out. And within that, yes, we're going to have to define it, because if we don't define it, how do we know if we're meeting? How do we know if we're succeeding? So we've got to be able to define it. We've got to be able to measure it in some way, shape, or form. And without that, we can't tell if we're succeeding. We can't go to our membership. We can't go to anybody else, even, outside our organization, say, hey, we're succeeding. And the question is, well, how do you know you're succeeding? We're like, well, because, we feel better about it and we've got more players. Well, more players doing what? Because we've got top level competitions, we've got social groups. Which one grows? Which one matters? They both matter. So I think we have to have that agreement, and I would kind of bend your initial description. I'm not being critical of your description in terms of like dictating what those things are. It won't be successful unless we work as a team on that, as partners on that with our membership. Because if the national organization says this is what our objective is, this is our goal, this is our metric for how we measure it, but everybody downstream says, yeah, it's not mine, I don't really care, and I'm depending on them, we're depending on them to help us make that goal, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work.
No, for sure.
So
for sure, I just think
I think our role is to set that objective though, and do it in a way that everybody is in agreement, or that there's buy-in top to bottom on it.
I
Not everybody. We're never going to have everybody.
Exactly. That's I think that's the point I was driving at. But okay. Yes, John, refereeing. As a Brit, right? And we have people when this goes out, people will probably have already forgotten what went off on the weekend in the Premier League, and the quote assault on the referee. But nobody wants to see that. Stroke, everybody wants to see that, right? But how do we raise, I guess, the respect levels? But how do we raise the profile of referees and the authority within the game? Because without referees, there is no game, right? It's no more than a kickabout. We're not ultimate frisbee. We just can't referee ourselves. How do we eradicate that red line that people step over?
Boy, that's a really good question, Nick. Start slow, and we'll build up to asking me a big question like that. I appreciate that. I think a couple things. One is, I don't agree with your premise, and your premise is widely held that we can't play without referees. We can't have a game without referees. I think we can. It may be closer to what you say. It's a kickabout and not a competitive game, but I would kind of disagree. I don't think we're essential. I don't think referees are essential to people enjoying soccer. Now, obviously, that not across the board, top to bottom, but I look at it that way, that the players will, in many ways, the players will police themselves to a certain extent, whether there's a referee there or not. If the referee's not doing their job, the players will take it on themselves to do the job. But how do you deal with that? Where's the red line? How do we have a culture that's I guess more respectful of that line? Well, no small part of it, I have to say, is the soccer that most people see most often, which is the televised top leagues. So what happened Sunday, I only remember that Fulham was playing. Who were they playing, Nick? Who were they on?
It was Man United.
Oh, yeah, it was Man U, because it was the FA Cup game. So, yeah, to see that as being acceptable behavior is a problem. And now, when you call it what it technically is under the laws as an assault, people look at it and go, that was no assault. Assault is when I got whacked over the head, in the parking lot. That's not an assault. He pushed him after, he came up from behind it and to the side and he pushed him. But under the laws and the way things are, that's what it's called. But laying hands on the referee, you just can't do that. There's got to be a place that it just stops. And but the punishment now the next thing is going to be, what's his punishment and how widely known is that punishment as to whether or not it has an effect. People look at it and go, yeah, too far, obviously a problem. But it's more than that. I mean, those are the the most egregious examples, but you go out every Sunday afternoon and it's, the kind of, in many ways, I would describe it accurately as disrespectful way that some people approach referees or treat referees is, while you've got the top part that everyone sees, you've also got from the grassroots up an issue too. So if the local league doesn't take it seriously and treat those incidents seriously and deal with it through punishment, or I don't know that, and there's probably an educational component here. I don't know what it would be that's effective. I got to be honest with you. But that's going to happen too. And I was involved in Illinois here, for a short period of time on the trial board, where the most egregious cases that when there was get brought up to us. And, we have to have an effective, meaning it's got to be quick. It's got to be reasonable in terms of its punishments, and it's reasonable in procedures. But it's also got to be known. I mean, if a player in, any league, whether it's a local league or regional league, if the consequences aren't tied to the action, the learning doesn't happen very well, right?
Yeah.
So
I would say that
that's a real.
My experience of soccer here, and it has realistically only been Midwest Prem level, right? I've only been to a couple of MLS games, and that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But counter to what I've experienced at the same level in the UK, there is a hell of a lot more respect for the referees and officials over here than there is back in the UK. And part of that, I think, is just the upbringing of the players, right? You can hear them saying, sir, that's the wrong call, or however they want to approach the referee, as opposed to the effing and jeffing that you're going to get in the UK, right? That's cultural as well as anything. You guys don't like to swear, unless you're little cotton socks. But I think it's only going to get worse, right? And there's got to be, you're right, there's got to be some sort of, not leadership, but there's got to be some sort of visible and correlatory punishment across the system, because if it happens in MLS, then it happens in Midwest Prem, and it happens in the Rec League on a Sunday morning. It just does. And the tales of officials being harassed and bullied and threatened and injured from the UK alone are just horrifying. And here you add in the ever-present gun thing, and Christ only knows what's going to go off. So it's got to be stopped at source. I just don't know how, other than, well, no, I don't know how. I don't think anybody knows how. But other sports manage it all right? Obviously, you get the high-profile baseball arguing with the umpire. Excuse me. But 9 times out of 10, that's just, in verticals again, the coach stroke manager, isn't it? It's not the players per se going nose to nose. In football, stroke American football, we'll call it we want, gridiron, again, it's it tends to be the coach. It's not the players swarming. There seems to be a peculiar thing to soccer that it's okay to surround the people in charge and intimidate, and I don't get it. There you go. That was my...
Yeah, it's interesting, Nick. I don't have the familiarity with the issues in the UK. I read some stuff about it because I was involved in a little bit of research here in terms of why our teenage referees were not staying. And I gather, and I trust what you say there, is that it's a bigger issue, that issue of disrespect and dissent and things like that is a bigger issue in the UK than it is here. And I think, I do think a big part of it is, because you mentioned baseball, you mentioned basketball, I think you mentioned basketball, and American football. I do think there's a cultural aspect to it. I mean, baseball, the argue with the umpire thing, comes from its origins, and that's the sport here, that's been around, kind of as a major, well-defined spectator sport for 100 years, and that's part of the culture. So it goes on. I think it's ridiculous that it's taken there's comical examples of it, but it's permitted as part of the game, right? And so, and as you say, here, you could say, you were going to say we're softer here, Nick. I could read between the lines, in the soccer world, but, it's, yeah, the kids and the players come from a little different environment here, particularly when you look at the real huge growth in terms of soccer here, in the last 50 years. Yeah, it's a lot of suburban kids, kind of better behaved maybe in some ways. I don't know how you say that, than somebody who's gone through, their soccer culture goes back, to their great grandfather, and that's carried through. That and how do you change culture? I mean, yeah, that takes decades, and I think
yeah,
that's
don't
kind
have
of
answers to this, Bruce. Really,
I'm not going to solve it. I'm not even. I can't. In some ways, I don't know that I'm that interested in trying to solve it. It's too big a problem.
It's not on your pay scale. All right, let's bring it back to funner things then. Why, in the first place, set up the Illinois Referee Association, Alliance rather, back in the day? What was the problem you were trying to solve?
The problem we were trying to solve was, the number of open slots at games, was going up. And people say we have a referee shortage. I think it's more properly defined as we have a game explosion. Our referee numbers haven't, while they're trending down a little bit, they didn't, you take the COVID years out of there. They're trending down, yes, but they weren't cratering. And they're still not. But they're not going up. And they're not going up nearly as fast as the number of games are going up. So the issue isn't necessarily less referees, it's just more games. And so less slots are being covered. So as we were looking at that, my business partner and I we said, hey, is there a way we can train up some people just to be ARs? Not have to do the full certification? Can we deal with the situation a little bit differently and put some kids out there that can handle this AR position, and then hopefully have a good experience for a year or two, and then go on to full certification. And so that's what we were looking at. And so we actually piloted a program. We talked about it before COVID. We had COVID, so we come out of COVID, and we piloted a program where we brought in 2 sessions of teenagers, just like 20 at a time, and did a little in-person training for a couple hours, did some field session training for a couple hours, so they could get out there and work as an AR at the younger teenage games. And it was very well received by them, the people that participated. A number of them continued to do it. And we talked to the local leagues about, it's like, hey, you've got a requirement for certified referees. If we train these kids up, will you take them as a suitable substitute? And they said, yeah. The leagues that we talked to in Northern Illinois said, sure. So we've been working on that. Now we're trying to expand it and add kind of an online component so that they can do a little bit more of the kind of nuts and bolts training, learning in their home, and then get them out for field session that just focuses strictly on what they're going to have to do. So we just pared down, what is it that first year assistant referee actually has to do on the field? And that's what started it. And we've kind of looked at it as like, hey, there's some other training opportunities here, because what the Federation has done on the referee side has moved things to an online model with some components that fill in on field training, but on the recertifying referees, the older experienced referees, that's up to the individual states. So some states do, some don't. And so we looked at it as like, hey, there may be an opportunity here to do some training as well, because the referees are looking for it. They really are. And we think we may have a possible solution, at least in part.
I was just looking, we're actually hosting actually being put on by our youth academy here at DeKalb, and one of the local AYSO programs is actually doing soccer referee clinic on Wednesday, March 22nd. Last I heard, they had 20-some people signed up for it, which is pretty good for a little community that we're in, and certainly trying to address that. Is there anything, again, this isn't your job as executive director, but is there anything like as a club, and it gets me thinking about the academy and kids, and how do we teach them at a young age about respect and about, like, are there referee politeness courses available? Or like, how do we, other than lead by example, how do we try to do our part at the club level?
I think the lead by example is probably the biggest part, John, honestly, but in an intentional way. So it's like, not just like they'll pick it up because it's implied or, they happen to be there, but be intentional about the model that you're setting. Is like, hey, referees are important to us, and this is why we act this way. I think that is important. I think that's probably the biggest way that a club handles it. The other way is, again, intentional with the coaches, because, the coaches, as I mean, particularly with the kids, that coach has a huge influence on the way they act on the field and how they look at and respect different people associated with the game. And overlooking that piece, you can do all you want broader as a club, but if the coach that player is with, 4 days a week for months on end, that probably has the biggest impact, right? So I think there's a component there as well. But it just, as you say, I think it just comes down to leading by example. I mean, treat people the way you want to be treated.
I started in
that's fine.
Yeah, I started yelling the last few years. Every time I verbally get excited at a referee, I always say I disagree respectfully. And usually they just laugh, because you can't even be mad at me no matter how harsh I say it. If you say respectfully at the end, they just laugh and we go on about our day and everything's fine. But it's like, you have to acknowledge the problem first, that, hey, I've been critical of referees and stuff, and I don't take things too seriously anyway, but like, you can always do better. And I think acknowledging there's a problem and that we all play a part in it is a big thing. So it's an important piece for sure.
I think there's an important piece from the referee side as well. I don't think it's a part that can be ignored. Referees have a role to play, and we're good on kind of the technicalities and maybe proper positioning and decision making and things like that, but we're not always very effective at. I would say we're not very effective at having a systematic approach to how to deal with people, is what it comes down to. Is just how to deal with people. And because that's in the long run, that's what refereeing's about. It's about just how you deal with people. And it's the most respectful coach in the world, if the referee doesn't give them any respect, is sooner or later, their fuse is going to be too short as well. And, I've seen plenty of referees like that. I'm sure both of you have as well. And we've got to do a better job at that on the referee side. One little thing that I've done for, decades probably now, as a referee, is I introduce myself. Now, granted, I'm on the older end, and so it's a little easier for me to do this, but it's been very effective. I introduce myself to every coach at every game I'm at by first name, and I ask if I can use their first name as well. And I tell them to use my first name. If they're yelling at me, they've got something to say, call me Bruce. And I'm no longer the amorphous referee. I'm Bruce. And you're John, and you're Nick. So when I talk to you, or if I have to talk to you, it's, hey, John, hey, Nick. And when you yell, hey, referee, I'm like, John, it's Bruce. Call me Bruce. I think just that little step of personalizing that a little bit helps. It is, my experience has been it helps me. Now that's not data, that's anecdote, but it helps me. And I think if approached in the right way, you can do that. I know, and I've had this argument with people on both sides, refereeing and coaches, like, hey, coach is a term of respect. And it is, I agree. And that's why I always ask, like, may I call you John? And I got to tell you, I've had 2 coaches that have said, no, call me coach. Like, okay, that's fine. Because really, as a referee, you're not my coach. So let's talk to each other as people involved in this game. And now you're not just a noun, and I'm not just a noun, I'm a person. Maybe that helps a little bit. I think we got to think about more ways to do that.
It's not about the X's and O's of refereeing. It is a lot about conflict resolution and people and all that stuff. It's interesting. I'm glad it took 10 minutes to think about it today.
And I would also say, or ask rather, anecdotally, have you ever reversed a decision because someone was shouting at you from the sidelines or on the pitch as a referee? Like,
I want to say no. I've never done that, Nick. And as a 4th official, I often tell the coaches, like, you can yell all you want. I don't think he's going to change his mind, but if you feel better about it, okay, that's good.
Primal screen therapy.
No, ordinarily no, but there have been, I have changed my mind about things. That's happened. I don't know that it's directly related to somebody yelling at me, but maybe bringing it to my attention. Yeah, maybe. But ordinarily no.
Is he yelling? He's supposed to be yelling.
Ordinarily doesn't know. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know whoever said that. I don't know whoever said I had to be perfect 100% of the time.
VAR said it. All right, look, I'm conscious of time. So, John, do you have any more questions before we wrap this baby up?
No, Bruce is in my speed dial. He's going to get all my questions offline. But I definitely appreciate you jumping on, Bruce. It's good to hear. It's good for our thousands and thousands of listeners to get to hear what to expect with you as the new executive director and the way you're going about it. And I wish you all the best. And certainly we're not too far away geographically. If you need to pick our brains or get some input, we're always here to talk and listen.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to come on. I'm, don't have a lot of answers right now, so I'd feel free to reach out as I told a lot of our members over the weekend. I know you don't know much about me and I haven't done anything yet, but 6 months at our AGM, I said, I'm sure I've done a few things that will have prompted some type of a response. So I'd love to come back and talk to you when I've got some more concrete things to discuss, or you've seen some things and they have more concrete. You don't have to be so delicate about your questions as you do now when you're like, I've got no idea. I've only been here 3 weeks.
Well, Nick's soft. He's soft at delivering questions. That's all.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. Bruce, thank you so much for your time, my friend. Hopefully we see you out at the university at some point this season. If you do come by, please say hello. Can't miss me, you can't miss John. But if not, then best of luck with everything. I know you won't be there because you'll be busy. If you're not there, I can't imagine you this week. You're a fishing man. But yes, thank you for your time today. Thank you for everything you're doing for soccer in the region and further afield. Hopefully this isn't the last time our paths cross, and you are welcome back on this podcast at any time. Should you be running for election, use it as the propaganda. It's all good.
Thank you. My pleasure. Anytime.
All right. Thanks a lot. Take care, gentlemen. Thanks, guys.